Most people think they can handle a scary story. But these aren't just stories, they're accounts that scarred lives, and once you hear them, they'll live inside your head too. So, I challenge you, stay with me until the end. Don't look away, don't skip ahead, and above all, don't convince yourself it couldn't happen to you. It started like most small, irritating things to easy to dismiss, easy to forget. I was working late that week at the office, one of those projects that kept sliding from one deadline to the next until it finally ate my evenings. My apartment was a box above a laundromat, 2 bedrooms squeezed into a layout that did the job and nothing more. I liked it because it was cheap and quiet, or at least it had been quiet. On a Thursday around midnight, I got up to make coffee. The building's hallway smelled like detergent and old carpet. The dim emergency light in the stairwell made everything look a little too flat. I was halfway to the kitchen when I heard the first soundbite, like someone walking with socks on. I froze. It was the kind of sound you've heard a million times in a house that means nothing. But tonight it did something to me. I stood there in the dark, coffee mug in hand, trying to convince myself the sound came from the building's creaking pipes or the washing machines. I told myself to go back to bed. I told myself a lot of things. Instead, I padded through my living room to the window and cracked the blind. The street was empty, no cars, no one. The laundromat's neon sign hummed, and across the street a restaurant pulled down its gate with a metallic clack. Nothing that suggested someone should be above my ceiling. I made the coffee anyway, and the sound returned not above me this time, but inside the apartment. Slow, deliberate creaks from the hallway closet. I wasn't supposed to have anyone else in my place. The spare room's door was closed, and I hadn't had anyone over in weeks. My heart tightened, the coffee forgotten in my hand. The closet door was slightly ajar. Not an obvious open, a sliver of darkness where a single shoebox had been knocked forward. I told myself it was the cat I didn't have, or the building settling, or a stack of boxes slowly sliding. I told myself everything because the alternative was to believe someone had been in my apartment and was still here. I moved toward it in small steps, my bare feet making soft noises on the linoleum. I remember the detail of my hand on the knob. Dry, slightly calloused, the kind of small physical memory you hold on to because you need something tangible to measure fear against. I swung the door open. Nothing. Coats, boxes. A broken lamp I'd been meaning to throw out. No footprints, no new dust patterns. Nothing that said a stranger had been within arm's reach of my things. That night, I stayed awake until dawn. I played podcasts loud enough that the words formed a buffer between me and the apartment's quiet. At 3 in the morning, the toilet flushed in the apartment below me. At 4, something knocked against the wall like a fist tapping for attention. Then again, soft no pattern, no sense. I listened until the light grew gray and I couldn't keep my eyes open. Weeks went by with small, escalating things. Things only noticeable in the dark, and only when I was alone. At first, it was little. The kitchen light on when I was sure I'd de-switched it off, my headphones unplugged when I'm certain they'd been in. Once, the notes to a song I was listening to shuffled to a different track mid-play, like someone had reached for my phone. I'd see shadows cross the hallway, even though the building's single bulb stayed fixed and dim. Sometimes my bedspread would be turned slightly. Not exactly like a human turning it, but like something needing the linen to be in a certain way before it would rest. People at work noticed my exhaustion and suggested I take time off. I took a weekend once and returned to find my mailbox full of flyers I was sure I'd already thrown away. My neighbors were friendly but distant. Everyone had their own small complaints about the building. No one mentioned sounds above their ceiling. Maybe they'd gotten used to it. Maybe they just didn't hear what I did. The first night I saw it properly was on a Tuesday. I woke with the unmistakable sensation that someone was watching me. It was the kind of heat that gathers at the base of the skull when you realize you forgot something major, but this time the thing I'd forgotten was to be unseen. I lay still, listening. The air in the room felt almost viscous, like the apartment held its breath. Then, from somewhere behind me, there was a slow, sliding sound. Not a scrape, but a measured, almost cautious shift, like someone settling into a chair that creaks the first time you sit in it. I didn't turn. I felt the pressure of being observed pressing down on the back of my neck. I tried the logic ladder windows locked, front door bolted, no way through the walls. The building was old, but not that old. I rolled over, eyes barely open, and looked toward the doorway to the spare room. The room was dark, but at the far edge of the shadow, someone walked through it. Not a full figure, more like a negative space where light stopped behaving normally. It moved the way a person moves through a doorway, the slow transfer of weight, a hand touching the frame. I could see, as if through a late-night camera, the way the light bent around it. It wasn't visible in the way a person is visible. It was the absence of something that made the room as shadow deepen and thicken in a way that didn't match the lamp. I held my breath. Nothing happened for a long time. Then, almost disappointingly, it left. A step across the room that made no sound on the carpet. The soft click of the bathroom light being switched off as it left. When I flipped on the lamp to follow it, the spare room was empty, the closet doors were shut, the bed was made. Yet the air felt colder, like someone had opened a window and left it halfway. I didn't tell anyone. How do you explain the difference between being watched and being invisible? People would say ghosts, then laugh, then tell me to change apartments. I thought about moving. I thought about calling someone. Instead, I began to pay attention to patterns. It only came when I was alone. It never touched me. It avoided the point where a human body lay, as if it respected some unspoken boundary. It preferred the edges, the strip of hallway that met the kitchen, the shadowed corner by the stairs, the small space between the blinds and the sill. It liked to be near doors. Once, I woke to the shower running. The apartment was windowless on that side. The sound should have been muffled. Someone had turned the knob, let the water run warm, and left it. The bathroom mirror fogged in a pattern that suggested a hand had passed over it, wiped away. But when I opened the door, the towel was dry. The things it did were almost considerate, which is what made them worse. A book placed on the coffee table with a page marked as if waiting for me to read. My jacket folded over the chair as if I'd just stepped out for a smoke. Small acts that required being there, being able to manipulate objects, and yet leaving behind nothing but the feeling that something had been present. One night, I tried to catch it on purpose. I left a bowl on the floor with a single olive in it, ridiculous and childish, as if it would come down to eat from a dish. I set up my phone across the room with the camera facing it, recording. I left for the balcony with my headphones and watched the hall through the gap in the blinds. After an hour of tense silence, nothing moved. I came back inside to check the phone and found the olive gone, the bowl overturned, but the recording had only static. For the first 3 minutes and then a single frame, a shadow passing in front of the lens like a hand. Static and then a frame. It bothered me because in that one frame the shape looked like it might have fingers. Not the full fingers of a hand, more like elongated, thin extensions, but there was a suggestion of articulation. As if whatever it was could pretense the common motions and gestures. The recording's timestamp had a 20-second gap. My phone's battery was full, and there was no reason for the glitch. I replayed it again and again until my eyes burned. After that, the sense of being watched intensified. The thing seemed to respond to the fact that I knew it existed. It began to do things that suggested intent rather than habit. It would reposition objects in ways that suggested direction pointing, almost. Shoes lined up facing the door. The remote placed under the couch with the buttons facing upward. One night, my apartment key was set on the radiator in the precise slot where I could see it from bed. Little arrows. They read like a language I couldn't learn. I started talking back. Not aloud at first, just murmurs into the dark. What do you want? Are you hurting? It felt absurd, like speaking to a noise in the pipes, but words mattered. Those nights, the rearrangements took on a near shepherding quality. The coat that had always hung crooked now sat perfectly straight. The blinds, which hated to fall evenly, were aligned in a way that let a sliver of sunrise precisely bisect the living room carpet. It was as if whatever it was training the apartment to be ready for something They shred into each other. I stopped answering my phone, not because I wanted to hide, but because hearing another voice in the world made the walls of my apartment feel tighter, like a second person cramping the space where the other one already lived. When I did go out, I felt eyes following the back of my neck, not a stranger's glance, but the weight of something that expected me to return. Then one small final change happened that reframed everything. It was late fall cold enough that the radiators clicked and hissed, but there had been a rain that night. A calm, steady falling. I'd listened to the open window while trying to sleep. I awoke to the sound of the front door opening and closing, faint but real. The kind of sound you make when you come in from the cold, a final, decisive click of the deadbolt. My chest dropped because I knew I had locked it when I left the television on for white noise. I sat up, heart thudding, and reached for my phone. On the screen was a text from an unknown number. It was one word, home. I walked out. The apartment smelled cleaner but colder, like a place that had been aired out and left empty. The coat rack held a coat I didn't own, made from some rough fabric I couldn't identify. The shoes on the mat were not mine. They were heavy, dark boots, set neatly with laces tucked in. There was a whiskey glass on the table that smelled faintly of smoke, though I don't smoke and no one smoked in my building. The radiator was hot where it had been touched. The bathroom towels were damp. Everything that was changed was done with that same indifferent care. No vandalism, no message scrawled. No sign of forced entry. Just curated additions like a homeowner arranging rooms in anticipation of a guest. I thought about calling the police. I thought about moving. I stood there for a long time and watched the apartment as if it were an exhibit. The coat hung by itself. The boots seemed to breathe in the deep quiet. I took a breath and went to the bedroom. The spare room door was shut. I opened it and found the blankets pulled back as if someone had slept there and left without turning on the light. There were indentations on the mattress, 2 deep grooves, long and oddly uniform, running the length of the bed as if 2 arms had rested there for a very long time. Not the hollow of a body, but the impression of something twice the width of a person, something that had pressed down and then slid away. That's when the sound started again, a sliding, measured, made with intention sound behind me. I turned slowly. It was standing in the doorway, or rather, the doorway was standing with me. That same absence of light made more solid at the edges. I could see the outline of shoulders, the suggestion of a head. It was as if the doorway had decided to occupy itself. The coat on its shoulders matched the one on the rack. The boots by the door were the whiskey glass sat at its elbow. It looked like home did a silhouette that could have been anyone. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I don't remember making the choice not to, only that all the little noises in my body tuned down to a single, steady hum. It lifted its head in a movement that nearly matched human curiosity. For a moment, just a sliver of a moment, I thought I'd see anything I could recognize. A face, eyes, teeth. But there was nothing. The shape in the doorway didn't have features. It had only the sense of an attention that had turned inward at the same angle mine had. It took a step into the room and the light shifted, like a film being slid across a projector. The air smelled suddenly like the laundromat downstairs, a clean scent with an undertone. I couldn't place old linen, something like iron. It raised a hand, slow, deliberate, and rested it on the edge of the mattress, right where one of the grooves was. The mattress sighed in a way that made the hairs on my forearms stand up. Then it did something I did not expect. It reached very gently and pressed a fingertip to the inside of its wrist, as if checking its pulse. And then, without any discernible motion like turning a doorknob or flipping a switch, it vanished. Not a fade. Not a dissolve. It simply stopped being there. One heartbeat, it was a silhouette in the doorway. And the next, there was only the doorway and the faint scent of laundry and the steady, impossible impression of 2 long grooves in my bed. I was alone. The apartment was, for a second, exactly what it had been the week before. A sad little box of rooms with worn carpet and a humming fridge. But it also wasn't. The grooves remained. The boots remained. The coat remained. and on the edge of my coffee table, in a pale ring where a glass had been placed, there was a single, clean fingerprint. Not mine, not smudged, a perfect print. I put my hands directly over my heart and felt the thud of my pulse under my palms. I waited for a sound thunderous, anything that would make sense of the absence, and only the radiators hissed, and high above me, in the thin box of the night, I thought I heard the soft sound of socks sliding across the floor, away from the door. I haven't slept properly since. I leave some lights on now, but they feel less like safeguards and more like stage lighting. The coat stays on its rack. The boots stay where they are. Sometimes I think I see a shadow leaning just past the blinds, watching me from the strip of hallway. Sometimes I hear quiet knocks at the exact moment when I think of leaving. The text stopped. There has been no more home, no other note, no other sign. Only the small, curated changes the thing makes to my rooms and the feeling that if I ever decide to go away for longer than a day, the apartment will accept me back differently. If you ask me what it wants, I would tell you I don't know. If you ask me whether it can hurt me, I would tell you it has not yet. There is a patience to it that sits like weight in the quiet hours. It comes at the borders of things, the edge of the blinds, the crack of the closet door, the space between a coat and a hanger. Last night, just before I turned the light off, I heard the front door click like someone locking it from the inside. I sat up slowly and watched the doorway. Nothing. The city hummed outside. I told myself not to be ridiculous. I told myself all kinds of things because I couldn't write the last bit down and call it anything other than the truth. In the morning, there will be an extra mug on the counter, placed neatly beside the one I use. There will be a soft indentation in the couch where someone might have rested their weight. The grooves in the mattress are still there. And on the small table in the hallway, by the keys I never leave there, lies a single business card blank. Except for the faintest smudge of something that looks like a fingerprint, I have the keys in my hand now. My thumb rubs the metal. I can't tell if I'm waiting for something to happen or waiting for it not to. I want you to know that if you move into a place that feels like it keeps secrets, keep the doors locked, keep a light on, and try not to notice the small changes. Some things are polite, some things are patient, and some of them learn how to make a house look exactly like home. If I leave, I will leave everything behind except this story. If I stay, I will keep the light on and the door locked and listen for the socks gliding down the hall. Either way, the grooves will remain. There's a sound now, very, very close, like someone carefully folding something small and soft. It's not a human sound. It's an intention. I'm turning off the lamp. Good night. I never thought much of the little things in an old apartment. You notice them when you're moving in creaky floorboards. The way the radiator hisses at night, the faint smell of something that isn't quite mildew but never goes away. You accept them because they're part of the price. Lower rent, a neighborhood that's still affordable, and a landlord who only shows up when something breaks. Those details are the kind of things you tell yourself are normal. They are the kind of things you stop noticing. Until you can't. I moved into a third-floor walk-up in late October. The lease was short-term, the building a converted row house with thin walls and oddly placed windows. I liked the apartment because it was small enough to clean quickly and quiet during the day. The previous tenant had left a few boxes behind old books, a broken lamp, a set of keys that didn't unlock anything I had. The landlord shrugged when I asked. "Probably hers," he said. "If she calls, give them to me." That was the last I ever saw of him. The first week was the usual. Unpacking, setting up a futon, buying a kettle. There was a small calendar nail-scarred into the kitchen wall. Someone had written, "Do not turn off," in faded marker above an outlet near the sink. I assumed it was for a tiny heater or the water heater. I left it alone. On my third night, I woke to a faint tapping. Not loud like someone drumming their nails slowly against glass. I froze, listening. The sound came from the bathroom, a thin rhythm against the mirror. I told myself it was the radiator again. I told myself the building settled. I held my breath and waited for it to stop. It didn't. It stopped when I stood up, and it started once I lay back down. That simple stop-start was worse than a constant noise. It felt purposeful. The next day, I mentioned it to my friend Leah. She laughed and said old buildings have quirks. If it makes you paranoid, put a note by the mirror. Harmless advice, except that night the tapping came from the kitchen. It was different, softer, like fingertips tracing a rim. I followed the sound with a flashlight app because the apartment's overhead bulbs flickered when I touched the switch. The kitchen was empty. I checked the windows. The back fire escape chain clinked faintly in the wind, but nobody was there. I told myself I was tired. Tiredness started to make a pattern. I'd be awake an hour after bed, then 3, then sometimes all night. There were other small things. My phone's alarm would show it had been snoozed when I was sure I hadn't touched it. A mug would be placed crooked on the counter when I knew I'd left it straight. The music player I'd left paused on the couch would be playing when I walked by. It was easy to blame absent-mindedness. It's easier to blame yourself than to imagine someone else. Then one morning, I found a note tucked under my apartment door. The paper was thin, like something ripped from a cheap notebook. In small, hurried letters it read, "Don't trust the sound. No signature. No return address." I stood there for a long time with the paper in my hand, feeling stupid for being surprised. The stairs creaked underfoot as a neighbor passed the landing above. I told myself maybe it was a prank. I told myself I had neighbors with a sense of humor. I told myself a lot of things. I taped the note to the inside of a cabinet where I could see it without making it obvious. The words sat there like a splinter I couldn't get out. For a few days nothing happened. I slept better. Then, at 2 a.m., the faucet in the bathroom began to drip. One drop, then another, slow and steady, as if someone were giving time by the sound of water. I lay in the dark and listened to the pattern. It was regular. Then it changed, 2 quick drops, a pause, then a long thin drip. The rhythm felt deliberate, like signal code. I couldn't tell whether I wanted to follow it. I got up and went to the bathroom. The faucet was dry, not a single bead on the sink. I touched the metal. It was cold. I checked the mirror. Small circles of condensation had formed along the edges, as if someone had been breathing near them and moved away. I swear I felt the back of my neck prickle like someone watching. I left the bathroom with the light on and sat on the edge of the futon, waiting for the muscles in my chest to stop twitching. When the faucet started again, it was from inside the apartment, not the bathroom. It took me an hour to find the source. The dripping came from the ceiling above the sink, a hairline crack in the plaster. When I pressed my palm to the crack, something thudded softly above me, not like a footstep, more like the dull, muffled knock of a palm. I said aloud, "Okay, that's a thing. Now we call the landlord." I never called. I convinced myself the building's top-floor tenants had pipes. I convinced myself the landlord was at work. I convinced myself of anything to stop thinking the sound could be assigned to a person moving around in the gap between my ceiling and the apartment above me. Weeks bled into a pattern of sounds. A scrape behind the washing machine on days I did laundry. A whisper, no words, just the cadence of breath when the hallway lights flickered. Objects shifted an inch left or right overnight. I'd wake with the feeling of being observed and find nothing. My friends started to say, softly, that I should move. "You can't sleep here," Leah said. "You look like shit," I laughed, then hung up and sat on the floor considering how many boxes I'd need to pack. What finally loosened whatever tether kept me, there was a camera. Not a paranoid move, an ordinary Ring camera for the door. I set it up by the entrance, more to satisfy myself than because I truly expected to catch anything. The first few days the footage was unremarkable. Packages left, the neighbor with the small white dog, me coming home late. On the 4th night, I watched the time-stamped footage back around 2 a.m. The video showed me myself walking from the kitchen to the bedroom in the dark. I watched the curve of my shoulder, the way I rubbed my face, but something about the movement was wrong. It was too smooth, like a recording layered over the real me. The camera panned left, and suddenly a figure sat up on the futon. It wasn't me. I slowed the footage down. The figure was small in the frame, hunched, and it moved with a deliberateness that made my stomach drop. It didn't fully stand. It tilted its head like it was listening to something beyond the walls. When it turned, the face was blurred by shadow, but I remember the shape of its hands-long fingers, palms flat against its knees. It gave a quick, jerky turn toward the door, as if someone had called it. The time stamp flicked. The camera's feed glitched for a second, then resumed with me asleep on the futon, drool at the corner of my mouth. The figure was gone. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the tape until dawn, trying to convince myself it was some editing artifact, a lazy motion blur. I scrubbed through frame by frame until my eyes stung. At 2:12 a.m., I saw it again, in the kitchen leaning against the counter, breathing out a puff of breath that fogged the glass of the window. The breath condensed into words that the camera couldn't catch. It was like watching a mouth form secret syllables. I wanted to leave. I pictured myself hauling boxes down 3 flights, the landlord's indifferent face, the thought of starting over. I wanted to be rational, so I set more cameras, one in the hallway, one pointed at the ceiling, one over the stove. I told Leah about the footage. She came over with a flask and a flashlight. We drank, and between gulps we laughed like people who are trying to drown the idea of a monster with alcohol. She stayed the night on the couch. We both watched the front door camera at 1:58 a.m. The feed showed the hallway empty for long stretches, then the stairwell light flicker. The building's other tenants were out or asleep or whatever they'd always been. At 2:05 a.m., something moved at the edge of the stairwell, an arm? No, a shadow stretched across the wall like someone moving very close to the light. Then, when the feed cut to static for the first time, the sound came across the camera. 3 soft taps in rhythm, as if on glass. We both heard it in the apartment, too. Not from the camera speakers, but from the hallway outside my door. The tapping came, slow and deliberate, and then the apartment door handle rattled once, twice. Leah held my hand so tight that my knuckles went white. "Call the police," she whispered. I didn't. I dialed because I couldn't otherwise breathe. No answer, an automated voice saying the line was down. The building's ancient wiring, the cops said when I finally reached them later, causes crosstalk. They offered to send a patrol anyway, but when the officers arrived, nothing was there. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. They looked at the cameras with polite skepticism and said they would file a report. The footage had a way of undermining its own credibility. 1 minute in distinct presence, the next a glitch, and then nothing. Leah didn't stay after that. She left in the early morning light, her cheeks pale, leaving a sweater on my couch. She texted me later, "Get out, now." I wondered if she meant now as in immediately, or now like the way we use now sometimes, without urgency. I didn't pack that day. I lay on the futon and watched the ceiling, and for the first time in months I heard nothing at all. Silence so complete it had weight. That silence broke at 3:17 a.m. with a phone call. The number was unknown. I didn't answer. The ringing stopped. It rang again, a series of short, insistent vibrations. I picked up on the 4th ring because something about the pattern in my chest set me to answering. There was a breath on the line, a slow inhale that lasted about 10 seconds, and then a voice that sounded like someone speaking underwater. It said, very softly, "Do you remember the calendar?" I didn't. I tried to make a joke. "Which calendar?" I said, though my throat felt wooden. The voice exhaled, and there was the faintest sound of paper being slid across a table. "The one on the wall," it said. "Don't ignore the dates." I hung up. I stared at the calendar in the kitchen without moving. There, in the corner of the month, someone had once scribbled a date with a heavy pen. The number was circled 3 times. The month had been a year ago. The ink was older than the rest of the markings faded, like something written by someone who knew they'd not have to look at it again. I had no memory of seeing it before. The circle sat like a coin under glass. I ripped the calendar off the wall and, in a fit of anger, tore the corner where the date had been circled. Nothing fell out. Nothing changed. The tear looked stupid, like a child's tantrum. From that night on, time blurred. The cameras showed things that should not have been. Footsteps that started in the hallway but stopped mid-stride, as if their source had vanished. Reflections in the oven door that didn't match my movements. I began to dream in small, precise loops, a hallway light flickering, a shadow tilting its head, a calendar with one corner torn. Each dream ended on the sound of 3 soft knocks. I would wake from those loops with my heart hammering and the feeling that someone had been watching while I slept. Once, at 4 in the morning, I found the keys I'd been missing for weeks laid out on the kitchen table in a neat semicircle. There were 5 of them. They were different sizes and styles, and none of them fit any lock I owned. I left them there for days, a silent puzzle. When I finally went to toss them in the drawer, one of the keys was warm, as if it had just been handled. I looked at the calendar, at the torn corner, at the note tucked in my cabinet. Don't trust the sound. The words felt like a hinge. They swung open a door in the back of my head that I had been keeping shut for months. I didn't last another week. I moved out with a duffel bag, and the sense that leaving would mean erasing the last month like chalk from a board. The landlord didn't ask why. He only asked if the apartment was clean. I left the cameras behind. Too much evidence, too many questions. I told myself that once I was away, the sounds would no longer follow. I slept on my friend's couch for 3 days. I told people there had been mice or construction issue or ghosts, depending on who they were and how much I trusted them. Most people smiled politely. It seemed like the correct thing to do. I thought I was done with it. Life resumed its slow, courteous pace. I found a new place across town, modern building, concrete security entrance. The first night there, I dreamed of the calendar. The second night, of keys laid in a circle. On the third night, just as I drifted to sleep, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't want to answer, but something in me listened. The message was a single image, a photo of my old apartment door, taken from the stairwell. There was a smear on the paint, dark and glossy. When I zoomed in, the smear looked like a thumb pressed against the wood from the inside. I thought it was over. I went back to sleep and waked to normal things: coffee, bus tickets, the remote click of an elevator. Then, on the kitchen counter of my new apartment, taped to the underside of the edge of the counter where only someone tall or careful would see, was a small scrap of paper. On it were 3 dots arranged in a triangle. Under them, in handwriting I'm still sure I've seen before, were the words, "Remember the sound. I don't go back. I don't call the landlord." I don't look at old camera files in case they show me something I can't undo. My nights are quieter now, but the quiet has a weight. Sometimes, just at the point when I think the world is finally mine again, I hear something from far away, the soft scrape of fingers along glass or 3 slow, deliberate knocks. It could be a neighbor moving a ladder. It could be plumbing. It could be nothing at all. But every now and then, when a bus slows to a stop, or a cup is set down too carefully, the sound lines up with what I remember. It fits into the hollow place where memory makes a pattern out of random things. The sound is patient. It doesn't want to be discovered quickly. It waits for me to stop noticing, for me to fall into the day, and then it taps at the edge of the world I've rebuilt. If you re-listening to people like me, if you ever sleep in an old apartment or wake to a noise that makes your skin crawl, be careful with the small things. Don't tape notes to the inside of cabinets if you don't want someone to read them. Don't set up a camera if you can't handle what it might show. And if you ever find a calendar with a date circled that you don't remember circling, tear it out or burn it or leave the apartment and never come back. I tore out the page and the sound still remembers me.